Well, I shouldn't say that. I've traced a lot of their pathologies throughout histories. Now, number one, whether or not it's an alien or a demon, or it really doesn't matter what kind of mask they're wearing, the phenomenon wants to self-replicate its own species. And not just that, but it wants to relocate its own consciousness. And I appreciate you asking me these good questions. It's making my job easy tonight. But yeah, so if we're looking at this intelligence, foremost, they do like to obviously induce us into dream states, to dislocate our consciousness out of our bodies. But more than anything else, what I've noticed is that they like to impregnate, and they like to take the fetus, and all of this is, again, it's surrounding what we would consider to be possession.
When an exorcist tries to rid a body of a spirit, is it the demon they're trying to get rid of?
Yes, they are. This is a very controversial passage of Scripture that I'm going to employ here, but it comes out of the book of Psalms, chapter 109 and verse 6. A lot of Bible scholars and even rabbis have an issue with this because it's one of the cursed texts. And it's indicative of something that pretty much, but you're going to put out there, it rocks people's worlds because it doesn't fit their blueprint of the demonic. Psalms 109 and 6, David is talking to God about a man that's been falsely accusing him. And so he asks God, he says, place over that man a possessing, evil, disincarnate man. In other words, put in him a ghost. And then he says something that's equally as disturbing, and it says, next to that ghost, place a Satan, an adversary, an accuser. And so there was an age-old argument throughout millennia, and especially within the demonological world, that what a lot of these priests are doing, and even just researchers are doing, when they're trying to release that entity from that demoniac, what they're not realizing is that fallen angel is attached to an unclean spirit. And by getting rid of the fallen angel, it does not mean we got rid of the unclean spirit. So there are various hypotheses of what's going on, but essentially the exorcistic rite is designed to get rid of the entity and any kind of residue the entity has authored in that individual.
Are these demons attached to the afterlife?
Their pathology is, their belief systems in many cases are, their language preferences are. Especially within the debug phenomenon, we have cases well into the 19th century where whatever is possessing these people, it doesn't fall underneath the linguistic umbrella of Catholicism. I mean, if we're looking at some of these entities, especially, this is interesting, one case in 1999 where an entity possessed a woman, but the entity itself, he was not Jewish, and yet it was in a Jewish area of the world, right? It was in Levant. And so what happened was the woman was Jewish, she was rabbinic, and yet the spirit inside of her did not fall underneath the religious tradition of Judaism. And so what they would have to do is go to a local village next to them and find someone in Islamia to come and cast this entity out. So what we're witnessing is not just their belief systems that they're carrying on in the afterlife, but their language preferences, which I think is fascinating.
What are they, though? What are they?
That's the age-old question, my friend. Whatever they are, I'm leaning towards a very unique hypothesis that these are, in fact, mutated ghosts, and that there is something to do with being re-embodied that defines their entire existence. But, even getting back to the Dybbuk, which is what we're talking about tonight, there are two definitions.
That's a Jewish phrase, isn't it?
Correct. Yes, sir. Yeah. Absolutely. And there are two definitions to this that I think will catch a lot of people's attention, okay? Number one, the word Dybbuk simply means to attach or to adhere or to cling.
Or possess?
Correct. And so what's really interesting, though, is it's almost like it's a dual meaning. So the first meaning is to possess, to cling to attach. The second meaning, and this is the one that really, really captured my attention. The second meaning is the impregnation of the dead in the bodies of the living. And you'll see that in the pathology that we'll reference tonight or this morning.
Interesting take on all of that. What makes them so evil, Nathaniel?
I don't know. A lot of these beings, matter of fact, there was a case study in the 17th century where one of these entities was quite literally stalking its own crime scenes. It had manifested to a man that was picking apples in an orchard, and next thing you know, this entity possessed this man. And when this man went to the exorcist, they were interrogating the entity and said, why would you? They were looking for pathology and victimology, which is what we're all looking for. But they asked the entity, they said, why would you pick this individual and not the others? And the entity, in no uncertain terms, claimed that he had committed a crime in life directly underneath that apple tree in that specific orchard. And so what the exorcist realized is that this entity was essentially, by all measures, a serial killer in a sense, in that it was demonstrating exactly what our serial killers that are alive right now are demonstrating, which is they do stalk their crime scenes, which is alarming to me.
But they're not fallen angels, they're not ETs, they're their own grouping.
Yes, absolutely. Now, there are pathologies and victimologies that interconnect with UFO abduction phenomenon in such a degree that it's glaringly obvious, at least to me it is, and to some of my other colleagues, that there's a singular intelligence here that is masking itself throughout history as demonic. I would like to suggest, and obviously this is just me, so take it with a grain of salt, but I would like to suggest that there is an intelligence that's wearing both the ET and the devic and the demonic mask to hide its true identity from us.
So even though we believe there are extraterrestrials, you're saying that these demons basically try to mix and confuse us and pretend that they're also ETs.
Yes. I would suggest that if you were to look at an ET, put him in the corner, and then look at a demon, put him in the other corner, turn the lights off, I would guarantee you there's a third intelligence there in the middle that we have not yet considered. And I'm just saying that based off of the case studies. What we've learned, though, in the field is that it's high time that we stop compartmentalizing the phenomenon to where you have debooked victims and then you have experiencers, or you have incubi victims and you have experiencers. If we're looking at the same intelligence, which it does appear to be that, then we're also looking at case studies that we are now intellectually freed to include into our research. But whatever we're dealing with, it's the same bloody footprints in the snow. These are the same rituals, and seemingly it's the same intelligence.
When one dies, Nathaniel, will they face these demons, or is that a different plane of existence?
I don't know. I could tell you this. A couple of years back now, I got really deep in my research. And from time to time, if it gets too dark, George, I'll just shut it off. You know what I mean? I suffer from it a lot of times. But I was really deep into the abduction phenomenon when I got two random emails from two different accounts within 2 hours of each other. And both of them were from experiencers or whatever we want to call them. Both of them told me that their guides said that they'll be waiting for me when I die.
That's pleasant. That's nice to know, right?
Yeah, I hope not, my friend. I hope not.
No, you don't want that happening. That's for sure.
No, not at all. Not at all.
What has been, in your experience, one of the worst cases of possession you've come across?
Oh, it was a murder. And it was one of my own cases. And I'll be very graceful with this. But, yeah, there was a case that I worked on myself where I walked into the house, and I was originally supposed to just pray with the family, and I had no frame of reference for what actually occurred. But when I went into the house, I could see that there was carpet that was cut up, and that I was specifically there to kick an entity out. And that was that act of possession, because it was a minor that committed the murder. That was rough because the girl, she had came into the house with a disembodied voice coming out of her mouth, and one of the victims I was working with in the family said that it was a female, but it was a male voice, in that without moving her mouth, it was coming out of her mouth and talking to them. That was pretty alarming because a lot of times, again, in these possessions, it's a direct confrontation with evil or what we would consider to be evil, but it's not to the point where, by the time you get there, the entity has taken control of an individual and accomplished what it wants to.
Nathaniel, you were talking about Dybbuk's at the half, a Jewish phrase, which is like, is it a walk-in?
It is similar to what Ruth Montgomery would call a walk-in. This is a little bit different. This is actually, it's incredible because it overlaps with the incubi phenomenon incredibly well. It's weird. But essentially what we're dealing with is it's the whole gamut here. I mean, we're dealing with an entity that has the desire to wear their victim like a biological avatar. And so, like, if you went, and all the listeners that are listening right now, if you looked on the Internet for the only known pictorial tradition of the Dybbuk, you'd see a man walking with a staff, and then you would see a skeleton that's clinging to him. Now, this is not a new phenomenon. Matter of fact, Apostle Paul mentions that when he goes through all of his sins, and then he mentions the fact that who shall deliver me from this body of sin? This whole idea of carrying a corpse on you, it originated it's within the Roman time frame where they would take murderers and they would make them wear the corpses of their victims until that entity affected their own bodies. And so really what we're dealing with, again, it is afterlife phenomenon, no doubt, but it's the re-embodiment of consciousness that these beings were after. And so whereas one would be an attachment, that's merely a stage to possession. And then the final purpose of the Dybbuk was literally what we would consider to be the missing fetus syndrome. And so it's all right underneath that umbrella. It's very unique. And they also believed in something that if many people are familiar with CE5, you'll notice this. They also believe that their intentions with these beings determined the beings' intentions with them. And so they would go out and they would perform rituals and conjurings, and then something changed. The phenomenon itself made eye contact with our species. And next thing you know, women are going to bed at night, men are going to bed at night, and beings were visiting them in their dreams. Matter of fact, I have one paper in front of me. It was a Damascus document where it was written by one of the Islamic exorcists, where they were dealing with one of these creatures, and they were asking specific women, okay, I know you have paranormal activity, but have you ever been visited by a being in the middle of the night? And so over and over again, these victims would come to the fore, and they would tell their stories, and what was happening was that these beings were manifesting specifically to women to use them as what I consider to be the mortal portal into this dimension. And so essentially what you would have is you would have women that thought, okay, that was a really bad nightmare, no big deal, right? It was just a dream or a dream state, if you know what I mean. And then the next day they're at work and they're looking at their hands and ankles and there are ligature marks.
Well, these entities, whatever they may be, they don't sound demonic.
It's something completely different. I tell people they're more demonic than demons. They're more alien than aliens. It's something that has evolved according to our awareness of it, and it's only evolving in order to evade